So we've heard about cataclysm and the apocalypse, and we've got two people here to share with you, ordinary people, not superheroes, but who have taken on superhero roles and done something which is significant in a way which I think you're going to find very encouraging. We have Gayle and Amani who've come to us from London to share some of their stories.
Thank you. So we're delighted to have been invited here to speak to you today. So I'm Gayle Hann, I'm a paediatric consultant and named doctor.
Mm-hmm. My name's Amani Simpson, I'm the CEO of Aviard Inspires and I am a youth leader.
So we're here to take you on our journey, a journey and our journey.
Yeah.
So there's been a 22% increase in knife crime this year. And the reasons for that, there's been many reasons cited for that. And depending on who you talk to and their political agenda, you'll get a different answer. So, Commissioner Cressida Dick, that's a tough name to grow up with in the police force. But she talks about needing more, the reduction of police on the streets, and also talks about social media influence and spiralling youth violence out of control. And then if you speak to the YMCA, they talk about the £750 million cuts to youth services by local councils as a great influencing in that. I speak to you today about knife crime on probably one of the bloodiest weekends that we've had in London. This is already out of date, there were 100 fatal stabbings by the 14th of May 2019, you saw that there were another 4 fatal stabbings over the weekend, and it was certainly a busy weekend for my hospital. So if you actually look at those victims of knife crime, they are mainly young and male, and in London they're mainly young black and male. And I didn't set out, I'm a paediatrician. I didn't set out to become an expert in knife crime, although you'll hear about some of my backgrounds, and then you'll see that I was drawn to it. As named Doctor of Child Protection, I've certainly seen, the influence of knife crime. Like locally, I've had 2 serious case reviews of promising young men that, have been stabbed to death. And when you looked back on their journey, you'd seen that they'd already been to my hospital before for stabbing. So you just think, at what point in their journey could I have, influenced that? And so, I've been fighting for improving youth worker services because young people don't want to talk to crusty old people like me. So, apart from Amani. I've been looking at how I can, make a change. And that's why I like to look at innovative ways to do that. And that's why I was particularly, grabbed by the idea that I could be working with maybe Amani Simpson when he was introduced to me by Georgie Agas, the communications officer at my trust, because he had a project that he wanted to do at the hospital.
Okay.
So, as you can see, at my hospital, we treat some pretty interesting wounds. And I'm going to pass you on to Amani.
Thank you. So, guys, as you can imagine, this isn't my usual speaking engagement, but it's a pleasure to be here and share my story with you today. This is my Auntie G, Auntie Gayle.
Well, that's where we do that.
She's a legend, 100%. And one of the reasons why I'm here today is to just really give you a message of hope. I guess that's what we need in a day like this where, as you said, at the weekend, we've had 4 stabbings and we live in a city and at a time where we hear these things all the time. So my story is this. I grew up in an area called Winchmore Hill, which is in North London. Anyone know Winchmore Hill? Okay. And I went to a school in Enfield called Enfield Grammar, which is a pretty good school. My dad was electronic engineer for Alan Sugar at Amstrad all the way through school. My mum was an entrepreneur. She started a blinds and curtains company, does a lot of work in Mayfair, Westminster, and I came from a really, really good home on paper, right? Okay. One of the things that happened when I went to school is I was bullied, which is quite generic for everybody's experience, I can imagine. Some people have experienced it or seen a friend go through the same thing. So what I started to do is I started to wear a mask. Very easy, right? To do that every day, to go in and put on a different character in order to fit in order to try and find friends, in order to gain favor amongst those that are making your life a little bit harder at school. And what soon started to happen is that boy on the right-hand side, that's me and my little sister, or the boy down in the primary school picture, I started to change. Started to hang around with people that smoked. Started to hang around with people that would commit robberies. I started to hang around with people that had this particular gangster image. Now, for me, it was innocence. It wasn't me trying to be a bad boy. It wasn't me trying to, I guess, bring these things to life. It was just trying to look like that so that these guys wouldn't make my life harder. And to be fair, it worked. You know, as I was going through school, as much as they weren't necessarily the kindest friends, I was still included in what they were doing. A lot of the time, I'd probably be the one that was like, Amani, go and do that. And I'd be like, all right, yeah, let's go and do that. Because you're just trying to be included. You're just trying to be liked, which I think is a human thing, right? Yeah. Now, one of the things that I wanted to share with you today is the idea of not judging a book by its cover. Because a lot of the time, as you said, in London, we hear these stories of young men who are dying, especially young black boys. And one of the things that I found working very hands-on is that all of these young black boys primarily are children. You know, you guys will know better than me, but it says that the adult mind doesn't develop until 25, right? Yeah? So a lot of the time we hear these young men and we associate the word gang. And especially after the London riots, it was then gang was associated with young black boy. And it's a shame because a lot of these boys are just children. They're just trying to survive. They've grown up in an environment that was actually not the same as mine, but they grew up in an environment where they didn't have a father. Maybe they didn't have opportunities. They didn't know that Alan Sugar was the guy that my dad worked for, who's now one of the richest people. These opportunities weren't available to them. And so I just encourage you guys, as we go through the story and you start to hear more and you start to see maybe some similarities with your own communities and your own experiences, that we don't judge a book by its cover, because everyone is just trying to survive. And a lot of people are wearing masks because they don't know anything else other than survival. Okay, I'm going to pass it back over. We should have rehearsed this before. We should have like a cool track to pass it over, right?
So I wore a mask at school as well. So I have similarities with Amani in that I started a school and I went from a local primary school to a private school, and I also felt like I didn't fit in. I wasn't bullied as such because everyone was too frightened to, but that was my mask. So I became, I was actually quite confused about my sexuality when I was a teenager. So then I started wearing a mask, and that mask made me the hardest girl in the school. No one was going to be bullying me about, possibility of me being a lesbian, because I carried a knife. So I carried a knife through my 4th and 5th years at school, and no one was going to say, die to my face. They might have said it behind my back, but there was no way, with me being a knife-carrying person, that they were going to say it to my face. So that was my mask. And so that brings us on to our meeting. So, as I said, our communications officer said, I think you should meet Amani because he's got a story he wants to tell. So you came to the hospital and we sat down in the Spice of Life canteen.
Yes.
And he's lived to tell the tale.
It was a good hot chocolate. It was a very good hot chocolate. But yeah, I think what kind of sparked that connection is I was working on a project, and I was working at a local youth club in Edmonton, which is our local area, and I drove past the hospital, and this project had a particular need that the hospital could help us with. So I thought, let me call, and I didn't know who to call, and so I got through to Georgie, and she said, okay, you need to meet Gayle because she's really sold out to help this issue. And I was thinking, all right, I'll come and meet you guys. And I'd done a lot of meetings around the kind of project preparation, but when we sat down and we spoke, I think you were one of the first people at the start of the project that really believed in the vision. I remember one of the first things that you guys did is you introduced me to the Evening Standard and said, this is a young man in our area, we'd like to tell his story. And the gentleman, Ross, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ross did an amazing kind of review of my life. He did a really good interview, and I was thinking I was just going to go online, forgetting about it. It's not important at that time. Before I knew it, I was getting phone calls from Channel 4, ITV, BBC, and they were saying, we'd like to get you on to our show. And I was thinking, okay. And then I realized it was actually in the newspaper, and that's how they got their news. And I guess from there, things just started to take off. One of the things that we were working on, I haven't told you yet, but we worked on a short film called Amani, and it was about my life. When I was younger, I got stabbed 7 times. I got stabbed at the age of 21, intervening in someone else's argument. I'd already kind of come away from some of the negative things I was doing as a teenager. I'd started a business. I had a girlfriend. I was really, really interested in my future. But for 1 minute and one night, I put the mask back on. And I got involved in someone else's argument rather than getting in my car. And I ended up being confronted by about 20 young men. And these young men were willing to kill me based on the fact that I was confronting them and one of their family members. Now, the reason I tell you that is because if it wasn't for North Middlesex and Gayle and Georgie, the film wouldn't have been as impactful, because we would have probably got, I think at the time we were looking at a GP surgeries kind of backroom to do the scenes and to try and make it look authentic. But Gayle allowed us to use North Middlesex. You gave us the ambulance information. You allowed us to fundraise in the atrium. You really promoted it on Twitter. Who saw it on Twitter? Thank you. And the other thing is at night you open it. You gave us a complete. Was it downstairs in the hospital?
Yeah.
We had a corridor, and a lot of the scenes that you will see when you actually do watch the film, these were really just kind of fly-by-seat type scenes where we planned it. Don't get me wrong, but it's like the hospital's still active. So we're doing this, and then we've got to stop for a minute for people to walk past, and it was an amazing experience. Would you guys like to see the trailer?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so this is us on set. Oh yeah, by the way, the pictures you saw at the beginning? That's all makeup.
Yeah. Very good,
right?
special effects. Very good special
All
effects.
right, it's all makeup. Here you go, here's a trailer.
I think you might have to click one more.
One more?
God's got me, yeah? So how did I get here?
Give me my bag back now. Give me my bag back now.
What kind of God would allow us to go through so much pain?
Are you mad, fam? I shot. Was it me, Arnie? Hey, who was it? Who was it?
I always heard the rules on the roads that it's kill or be killed. Why should I believe in you if my faith is in vain?
I just want to know who's moving through the Amani blood. What move? Amani.
Now, thank you. Now, one of the amazing things that happened during that time, and there was many, I could sit here for ages and tell you the amazing things that happened off the back of telling my story and then trying to impact the next generation. One of the things that happened was 4 days into the film coming out, we had 1 million views on YouTube. It was shared live on the BBC. They were at our premiere. We had ITV down there supporting it. It was in loads of newspapers. And I guess for me, one of the things that was really, really inspiring was I was reading the YouTube comments, as you guys will be able to when you go home, and it was young people saying, thank you for telling me your story, because of you, I don't want to be down that road anymore. I shared this with my younger brother, and he was doing certain things, and he's now turned his life around. And now when I go into schools and I do talks, I do this every day. I was saying to you before, I do this every day. I go into schools and primary schools, secondary schools, pupil referral units, and I tell my story, and I tell them that there's a hope. You guys can turn it around. You don't have to go that way. Yes, it's difficult, but once you find a passion and you find your purpose and you're able to start seeing a future for something different, you can turn your life around. And I feel like one of the reasons why this has been such a success is because we collaborated. It wasn't just, oh, well, that's your story, and that's nothing to do with me. We found a way to work together. We found a way for Gayle to use her resources and my resources. One of the things, as I said, was that we were crowdfunding. So we started with no money. Absolutely nothing. We took a leap of faith, and we had to raise 15,000. That then raised to 20-something thousand.
Yeah.
And I remember one day, or numerous days, we just have conversations, and Gayle would always be like, where are we? What's the target? All right, cool, I'm going to put it on Twitter again. All right, where are we? All right, we need to get it. And to me, it was investment. It wasn't just lip service, we'll let you use it. It was, I'm as involved in this as you are. And one of the things I loved about what you kept saying is that this is our film. And it is. This is not just about me. This is about the community. We all live in the streets that we talk about. You know, we walk down the street. I heard the other day in Islington, a mum got stabbed in her leg.
Yeah.
This could happen to anybody. It's not just a particular type of person. Yes, it's increased, but it can be anybody. So, pass it back over to you.
So, life now.
Oh, is it me again?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Life now.
Usually, one of the things I was going to say is the school I went to, I actually got excluded from there in year 9. I got expelled. They said you can't come back because of some of the activities that I was getting up to. But recently, I actually went back to my old school in Enfield Grammar, and I spoke to the children that were there. And I told them of my story, and I told them that, you know, I made certain mistakes, and I didn't leave this school with the best reputation, but you guys can. And one of the things I did when I was in school, which I'm not very proud of, but I stole my deputy head teacher's wallet. It was silly, I know. And it was just a very adolescent mistake. And in the assembly, the deputy head teacher was standing there. And when I said I stole his wallet, everyone was like, "Oh, you legend!" Oh! Because that's what you do in school, right?
Yeah.
But I got the opportunity as an adult to apologize to my teacher and say, "Sir, I'm sorry that I did that to you because I don't know how that affected you. I don't know what that did to the rest of your evening and your experience. So I'm sorry." And being a role model to these young men, they looked and said, "Yeah, actually, it's not right." And they clapped. And I didn't do it for that. I did it for the teacher. But I wanted to be a living example to them so that they could see that there was something else. I could have just gone, could have done. But that's not the story that I'm here to promote. I'm here to talk about change and, you know, really being the best versions of yourself. The other thing I did is I started to win awards for the things that I was doing. Now, I'm not here for the accolades. I'm just here to play my position, I say. But it's all right to get awards on the same at the same time. It's all right to get awards. The other thing I did is I got married. Yeah. And I got married to a young lady who's, I call her my queen. And she, basically, we've been together since we were the age of 18. I was 18, she was 17. She was with me all the way through getting stabbed and really helped me to rebuild myself. And a lady like that deserves everything that I have. So I decided to give her my last name and give her the legacy, you know? 100%. And then the final thing that I did is I started to become an ambassador for young people. I started to say, actually, it's all well and good me going through something like this, but how do I go and create change in the places that matter? So I started to have meetings with certain MPs. I started to go and sit down with councils and real decision makers. You were speaking about influencers. I didn't go to the people that didn't really care. I went to the people that could actually make influence, or had influence, shall I say. And one of the things that I did recently was went to 10 Downing Street. And I called my grandma and I said, "Grandma, when you came to the UK, you had a hard time, right?" She said, "Yeah." She was the first black head teacher in Cheshunt, the area that I live in now. She had a very rough time. A lot of racism, a lot of, you know, things that were really, really hard for her to swallow. And when I told her I went to 10 Downing Street, she said, "Amani, I'm so proud of you." And I remember when I was a boy, I never heard those words. I didn't have that positive reinforcement. But as soon as I started to unlock my potential and my purpose, these are words that people throw at me all the time, and I don't mean that to boast. I mean it because once I started to walk in my truth, things started to change. And this is all I'm here to encourage young people. Once you start to become the people that you're meant to be, people start to look at you different. You start to look at yourself differently. Yeah? This is the real handover.
So, life now for me. I've also won a few awards, but I'm
Yeah.
too modest to tell you about. I recently met that loser, as Donald Trump referred to him as, our mayor of London, who, we've had 100 stabbings a year. They've had 100 shootings a day. The big influence in my life is my daughter. But the main thing that we wanted to say is that, it's not enough, we're all doctors. It's not enough to, treat them and street them, as I always say to my juniors, get them out. 4 hours, 4 hours. But you actually have to sort of, learn from young people themselves. I mean, this is your learn, earn, and return.
Yeah, that's my mantra. I say it all the time when I go out. I say you have to learn, earn, return.
Yeah.
When you've got the money, you don't just move out and buy a nice big house. If you've come from an area where you have a certain amount of lived experience, or you just got a heart for the community, go and return. They need to hear from you.
But as doctors, we can learn from young people. We can give them a voice, and we can earn their respect, because then they'll trust us. And then we can return that, trust by looking at ways that we, as doctors, can really help young people and give them a voice. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a seat. There is hope for the future. The cool light of day is coming. Change is coming. We are the change. We can be the change. What questions do we have for these amazing people? We'll start with
lots
Twitter.
of inspiration on Twitter, but I'll leave that for you to browse through later. A Rouge Al Waddington asked, I believe the attitude to youth violence is largely negative. What advice do you give health professionals treating young people with knife-related injuries who come through our doors, and how can we break down the barriers that are put against us sometimes?
Is that a question for me? I very much believe that you have to give respect to young people, earn their trust, and find out about them, You must find out about them and what their dreams and hopes are. Sometimes they can't see any hope, but you've got to give them hope. I have, arranged work experience for young people. Someone wanted to work in a hairdresser's. I said, what are you good at? She's like, I'm good with hair. Because I said, you've got to be good at something. We've all got a superpower. What's yours? She said, I'm good with hair. So I arranged an apprenticeship in a hairdresser's. I arranged one young man to, he wanted to be a doctor. He was, a lot of potential, just in the wrong place at the wrong time, got stabbed. And he came back. You've met him. He's a fifth-year medical student now, and I arranged his first work experience. So I just think you've just got to talk to young people, give them respect, and find out what they want to do with their lives, because you could be a person that helps them on their journey.
It's very inspiring. Amani, your turn. Do you think that the term difficult teenager should never be used again by any healthcare professional? And what other terms do you find dysfunctionally used to describe young people when we should just be recognizing behavior as an indicator of needing our help? That's from Edward Snelson.
Very good question. I would definitely say that we need to stop using the word gang as a blanket statement to explain why young people are getting involved in in violence. It's not always gangs. The other thing that I would say is that when it comes to terms that we need to call them children. I think that changes it. I feel like when a few months ago when the young lady died in Barking, was it Barking she died? She got stabbed, the young lady? I think so, Barking in East London. And before that, loads of young men, I think it was around the same time that Jaden had died, and they were using the word gang a lot, and then suddenly it turned into, what was she, a Girl Scout and, a child. And we have to be careful with the narrative, because there's a lot of young people that can't speak for themselves. And we can say, these are things that don't affect them, but all they constantly hear is about violence on their streets, and they're growing up traumatized. They're children. We are the adults, and we have a responsibility to them. And so that's what I would say. We have to look at them as children, and we have to stop calling them gang members.
And Joseph Macha asked, one frequent barrier he's had when seeing stab victims on trauma calls is difficulty to get them to talk openly about what's happened due to fear of them being labeled as a grass. Mm-hmm. How do you break through that?
That's a deeper problem. It's so deep. The reason I say that is because when I go into schools, it's trying to reprogram their minds. The first thing I say to them is, if your house got robbed, who would you call? the police. You're not going to call your friends to solve the problem. You're going to call the police. And I always say that you deserve that same level of care when it comes to your health and if you've been attacked. But it's changing their mindset, and that's not going to happen overnight. So I definitely think the first thing you can do is get relatable people. So people that have got lived experience to, I think it's Oasis that work in North Middlesex, and they obviously have people that have lived experience that will go in and they're in the emergency rooms and after and they engage with them. That's the first step, because it's all about having that trusted relationship with someone. And a lot of the time when you are a young person and you've just got a doctor that's trying to help you, it's very similar to a teacher. You just have a barrier up. No, you don't know my life. I'm not talking to you. I'm not opening up. So sometimes you need that translator that can just help the conversation flow.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, any last questions from the floor?
That was very moving and incredible.
Thank you.
As a paediatrician, when I'm in those trauma call situations, those stabbing conversations, very often I'm slightly detached from it. And it's the surgeons, the intensivists, the emergency medics who are dealing with the actual stab wound. And I'm slightly back with the parents and the families, trying to get them through this experience as well. And I wondered what advice you had about how to give tools to the families of these people to help these children, to help them understand their child better and where their child is coming from.
Very good question. I think we need to have a real shift in society. You mentioned it before about new money and old money. I feel like we have to really change the way that we engage with our communities, and it has to be something that is, I've heard conversation about the public health approach. You really need to have this idea that things are linking up, and you can go into a hospital, but also that hospital will kind of encourage you to speak to maybe another service. It's that you have to really pathway people, because you can only do so much. There's only so much conversation before you have to say, I'm sorry, I have to go and deal with another patient. So you need people that specialize in this every single day, that have the time to really build those relationships. And for me, yes, we can talk about the funding cuts, but I do believe that there are community organizations that do that. So it's about opening the doors to them. Obviously, making sure that you guys have got the frameworks in place to protect yourselves. You can't just let anyone come and speak to the patients, but really having a new way of thinking about who's really influencing these situations, very similar to what you said. So.
Any more questions? Change is coming. Change frightens most of us, but I hope you agree with me that the 4 people on the stage have shown us that whilst the future may be dystopian, we can change that. We can change that by connecting with people, and we can change that by our own actions. Please thank Taj and Helen, Amani and Auntie G for amazing talks.